because talking about humility in self-education is necessary. Them's the rules. Hello, and welcome back to Mother Academia. I just feel like I needed to do something formal because I don't have the setup with the computer and the books and everything because I don't really need them today. I'm also filming during daytime, so this is a wild moment for Mother Academia since I usually film those at night to be reflective of when I am usually doing Mother Academia. It's early in the morning when it's dark, or it's later in the evening when it's dark. But today, I'm kind of batch filming, and we're just going to talk about the first part of kind of a two-part Mother Academia conversation that I want to have. So if you're new here, I'm gonna go and link the first video to this series, but Mother Academia most simply is the intentional study this year that we moms are putting together. We're all taking a different course of study, something we're interested in, something that we've been through the classical wardrobe for a couple of years. We've done the lit life. We're really good at reading widely and deeply. We're just so good at it. And we're going to this year study as if we were almost in a graduate course or a school program, but we're just doing it on our own. We've come together as a cohort and we're encouraging one another. We're having symposium meetings in Common House. If you want to join those, our first one's in March. We're talking about ideas. We're hopefully sitting under the feet of wise people, wise words, and inheriting the things, the norms, the goodness that we should so we can pass it on to the next generation. That's kind of Mother Academia. And I've been talking about tips and tricks. I've been talking about the things I'm studying, how I put my course of study together. But today, I want to talk about humility because talking about humility in self-education is necessary. Them's the rules. And this came about because of my first couple of months this year doing Mother Academia, and also an excellent comment left by one of our Common House members, hey Teresa, who reminded everyone that even as we're going after these amazing books and the best ideas that have ever been thought, we can still turn into what I call book gluttons. We can still just be consumers, shoving it in, manipulating, mastering, wanting to conquer and move on, utilitarian reading, all these different things that we don't want to do as readers. And we can miss sight of our need for quiet, contemplation, spaciousness, all things necessary for learning. And so she left that comment and I was like, yes, you nailed it, absolutely. And that really tied in with my idea of humility and education. And so we're gonna do kind of a two-part conversation today. I'm gonna be looking at humility, and next time I'm gonna be looking at contemplation and spaciousness in learning, because these things are really necessary. So humility. I have found that there are kind of two things that can act as gifts of humility if you will receive them in your self-education. The first is circumstantial, and the second is a realization of your poor education. Both happen to the classical mother teacher. They just happen at various times and in various ways, but everyone will say, oh yeah, I've had that moment. And so the first is circumstantial. Now, this could be just because you are a mom and you have little kids that you keep finding it's very hard for you to get to your Mother Academia. Or in my particular case, last 2 months, everyone is sick all of the time. Small people, always sick. So in our family, January and February, we were completely sick. I mean, every week, kids just falling every 3 days. It was like never ending cycle. I would get the last one through and the first one would fall again. It was unreal. And because of this, I was getting sick all of the time because, you know, sick kids lay on top of you and they snot all over your face, and it's the most beautiful picture of motherhood I could give you today. And it's just, that's like caring for sick people. Oftentimes you get sick, right? So then I needed rest. And if I need rest, it means I can't get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to do my Mother Academia. What am I going to do? There's the temptation to hold your thing like this. Total, tight, fisted, clench life. Where you're like, I need to have this. I'm going to have this. I can't bend or flex for anything in my life. Maybe you don't do that. I'm very prone to doing that. This is the way I want it done. This is the way it has to be done, so I'm gonna make it happen. But no, the gift of humility is that in your service of others, your intellectual life may have to shift and change. And so the first part of humility in education is that God would like to teach you in many a way. And what I mean by that is that you have the responsibility to come to the books, to come to the table, to come and eat, as we say for our kids. And yet also you are a person moving in God's world in which all things are there to teach you. They're for your salvation. They're for your sanctification. They're to grow you in holiness if you are willing to submit to the life God has actually given you. And for young moms, sometimes that means being sick all winter. So for me, I'm also gonna give some tips here if this happens to you as well, because I just lived through this as well. I knew I needed rest in order to care for my family more than I needed to be up at 5 a.m. doing my Mother Academia reading, which means it was very hard to find the time then to do my Mother Academia reading because I've put it in that spot and that's the most consistent time I can do it. So a couple of things I stole from how I educate my kids. My kids are all Form 1, so if your kids are older, this doesn't work for you, but Form 1, our narrations are just oral. I sometimes have my kids do notebook work. I write down their narrations, they draw for me, different things like that. But the thing they're supposed to be doing in that time is actually just doing oral narrations. And so I started thinking about that. Well, how can I, because I'm doing narrations as part of Mother Academia, how can I pull back or shift without losing the thing that needs to be done? The narration is what's really important. Do I have to write it in my notebook? Not necessarily. But if you've watched these videos, you know that I really wanted to put everything down in a written notebook. That's something I had to flex on. So for a couple of weeks while we were really sick, whenever I could read, I just orally narrated, either in my head or to whomever walked by and was willing to listen. And I just did oral narrations because it kept me moving. It kept me reading. It kept me engaged in the ideas and the practice. And that and the narration are the two priorities. So what is the priority, and then how can you flex and turn on other things? And I just had to accept that I really wanted to have every single thing written down in my notebook. It was something I just cared about. I like the practice of writing things out by hand. I love my notebook. I love my fountain pen, all these things. But it wasn't going to happen if I was going to serve my family and actually pursue the greater good in these weeks of being sick more than a lesser good. Both good, but one was more important. And that just happens circumstantially when you're pursuing anything as a mom. This is why many of us are not going to graduate school, right? Because we couldn't actually follow through with the essays, the papers, the exams, whatever it is. So we're doing this on our own because we can actually continue to self-educate anytime, any place, any way. And then we can, is that true? Anytime, any place, any way? Anyway, no. We can really flex where we can to continue in the practice of learning, making it work within our ordinary rhythms, our commonplace life. So that's the first one. You kind of hit the circumstantial stuff, and you never want to make your family the enemy of your project, if that makes sense. I have to tell myself all of the time that whatever it is for the people are not for the thing. So the clean house is for the people, so life can abound, so we can have all these great times together, so we can live here and enjoy it, and school here and enjoy it, and work here and enjoy it. The people are not for the house. When the people are for the house, it means that they're the problem and they're messing up my perfect clean house. No, the same thing is true with learning and growing. Even in the original Mother Culture article from a woman named A in the Parents Review from Charlotte Mason, this is not a Charlotte Mason idea in the sense that Charlotte Mason did not talk about mother culture, if you don't know that. But in mother culture, it was your kids are gonna keep growing and keep learning, and you don't wanna be the one who never learned anything the whole time you were educating them and you have nothing to offer when they're older. So you continue to learn because it nourishes you, it feeds you, mind and spirit, but also you do it for the people. Like, intellectual virtue is worthless if it does not come out of your fingertips. If you cannot live a life in pursuit of virtue, serving and loving those around you, then it really does not matter if you read all of the books about virtue or anything else. It didn't do anything to you. So even our Mother Academia, it's for people, it's for ourselves, it's for those in our home. The people are not for Mother Academia. They are not the problem. They're not the inconvenience, right? And that's the first gift of humility. The second gift is that you realize that your education stunk. To put it plainly, if you're like me and you were mainly public schooled all the way through, them's just the rules, as I say. It's just the reality that you're gonna find gaps in your education. And now there are two things that happen in this. One is like an overall issue. You realize, oh, I really did not learn lovely things. I don't love lovely things. I think this happens to the mom when she first comes through the classical wardrobe. She's like, this is an amazing world. I want to be here. Oh my goodness. I don't like anything you guys are talking about. I don't want to read the books you're talking about. I don't want to listen to the music you're talking about. I don't want to do the habits you're talking about. What's wrong with me? It's just that you're formed by the things you repeatedly think, love, and do. And if you've had your average American modern diet, you're not probably going to be standing in the best place. But you could always change your diet, and you could always learn to love the lovelier things. And that's what's so inspiring and so hopeful about classical education, about pursuing truth, goodness, and beauty, is that your loves, your desires, your practices will change according to the ideas you engage and the habits you act upon. So that's always really encouraging to me. But that's the first one. And so the one that I do with that is first give the encouragement that, guess what? If you educate your children this way, say you take like Ambleside Online and you take all of their years of reading, you will, by the end of it, have read an amazing collection of books. Like, you will make it to Plutarch, you will make it to Plato, you will make it to John Milton, you will make it to these great things, Dante. You will make it to all these great books that right now you feel like, I can never get all of these read. I don't even want to read all of these. If you just read along with your kid, pre-reading each year, you will eventually have had an amazing education. It's just gonna take 12 years, right? And that's totally fine. One tip that I give is, there is a list by John Sr. It's called the 1000 Good Books list. And there's an opening to it in which he talks about the struggle of students coming to American colleges, and they couldn't engage with the books that would be in a basic like humanities civ type class. And it was because they had not read the books preceding those. They needed this life of reading that nourished them and taught them well enough they could then engage with these harder philosophical texts. And so the things on this list are like Grimm's fairy tales, Aesop's fables, a lot of cowboy books because John Sr. was a cowboy. Like just books that they should have read in order to build up and into, like The Wind in the Willows, and that moves on into this. And they just keep building on each other. So then the child is actually standing on a richness, an inheritance, a nourishment that then they can go on to these other things. But without all those books before, you're not gonna be able to jump into the basic philosophical text that he was talking about. So I have encouraged moms, do not look at the grade level. Just look at the list and find where you are and then read from there. You know what's great? If you have young children and you're reading fairy tales and you're reading Greek myths for the first time and you're reading fables, you are building out your own deficiencies from your own education while just reading to your kids. It's amazing. So that's one way. You'll just find generally your education was poor. The other thing that you'll find is you are missing a particular body of knowledge that you need. And you may have had plans to study this thing and you realize, actually, I don't know the preceding thing. And this, I think, really cultivates humility. My own example for this is in my Latin studies. I really want to learn Latin. I do. And Wheelox has been great, but what I found, and I talked to a bunch of women about this in Common House and they were very helpful, was that part of my problem as I got going in the first 3-4 chapters of Wheelox was I don't know formal English grammar well enough. I didn't realize that was going to be an issue for me. Now there are other types of Latin curricula that I could have used that I could have maybe avoided this a bit, but I wanted to use Wheelox and I'm enjoying it. And the issue though is just, I guess in public school in North Carolina, when I was in school, we just didn't care about English grammar. Not a big deal because I never had a formal grammar lesson. It just was not something we covered. And so now I'm trying to follow these English descriptions for my Latin work, and I'm having to keep rereading them and keep rereading them because I don't actually know exactly what he's talking about. That's not a great place to be when you're excited about learning Latin. And here's the bad habit I have. After years of being public schooled and knowing how to test well enough to avoid actually revealing that I didn't learn something very well, I can still get to my next Latin chapter, do my exercises, figure it out well enough to feel like I can move ahead. But that, my friends, is not learning. That's aiming for a test, aiming for a grade, aiming to move on, aiming to just say I've checked it off the list, but I actually want to learn this stuff. And so I'm pausing Latin, which feels like a major fail. I'm only 2 months in the year, but I'm pausing just long enough to work through some English grammar stuff and then hopping back in. You know what? That's what is required in learning. You're gonna figure out, oh, I just don't know this one thing that I kind of need to know to do this thing. Am I willing to pause the thing I want to do and go do the groundwork so I can do it well? It's kind of a question of education, and no one's looking over your shoulder. You don't have a teacher. This is a self-education thing. You are going to have to command yourself towards the way you want to learn and learn the habits of learning, the tools of learning, so that you can continue on and really enjoy and delight in the fruit of your labor. And so those are just 2 ways that I, in the last 2 months, have realized humility is the name of the game in self-education, and these are just 2 camps I think will happen to everyone, 2 issues that we'll all run into. So hopefully that's encouraging for you. Next time, like I said, we're going to talk about spaciousness and contemplation and your need of empty space and time in order to think through ideas, relate ideas, make ideas your own, make knowledge your own, because that is not something in our always have a podcast on, always have an audiobook on, always be doing something, always be taking in something world. That's not something we really prioritize, the quiet the need for stillness, the need to not have something coming at you while you let ideas do work in you. So I'll be back with that in a couple of weeks, and I will see you then.